So welcome. My name's Sherry Forsyth. I'm a peak performance coach, and my topic today is what an external trauma can do to a relationship. It's February, the month of love, and we've discussed various things, how to connect, all the 4 different types of love, how to introduce fun and spice back into your relationship. And so this last one in the theme of love and relationships is when something happens to either one or both of you that's very traumatic. So I'm not talking about a minor issue. I'm talking about big life events like losing your job, financial issues, relationship issues with other people that have been, like maybe the loss of a relationship with a family member, obviously death and the loss of people close to you. So those are the things, immigrating, big life changes or big life traumas that can have a profound effect on a relationship. So we're going to talk about trauma, what is happening in the mind and the body once we are exposed to that trauma, and then what we can do to help our loved one. So this is a subject very close to my heart because we suffered, my husband Mike and I suffered the loss of our daughter 18 years ago. And it was a very, very difficult time, very confusing. There were times when I wondered whether our relationship would actually be able to weather all the onslaughts. And during that time, because obviously we would both have changed, I'm sure my husband wondered who I was, who was this new person in the home, and I certainly wondered who this new man was that had moved in. So experiencing trauma is part of the human condition. There are very few people who live our lives unscathed by some kind of trauma. So it's not only you that it's happening to, it does happen to most people. So when a trauma happens to just one member of the relationship, only one person is changing. So then, even though that's challenging enough, there's one person who's the rock and the other person who has changed. When a trauma has happened to the couple, both of them, like the loss of our daughter or possibly a big financial issue that affects both of you change. And therefore the challenges are doubled and tripled because there isn't a rock that is managing to kind of keep you secure. Does that make sense? So if we can increase our understanding of what happens to a person who has suffered a trauma, then hopefully what we can do is we can prevent another trauma, in other words, a divorce happening on top of the original trauma. And so that really is why I've selected this topic today. As I'm speaking, if you like what I'm hearing, I ask you please to make a comment or press the like button. It just keeps me motivated as well, and knowing actually that I am reaching my audience. So I'm very briefly going to explain to you what happens in the body and the mind. But firstly, just to say that when a trauma happens, the result in our body and our mind is absolutely instinctual. Okay? In other words, our instinct takes over. And we have chemical, physical, and physiological and psychological, our whole body, in other words, is affected by a trauma. So we need to remember that it's a normal response. It's a normal response to an abnormal event. Okay? That's really important. It is a normal response. People are not losing their marbles and going mad. So our goal in this video today is to help you not just to survive the trauma, but actually to be able to thrive afterwards. And so there are a few things that I think are really important to mention. The first thing is that that trauma will forever be a watershed in your life. We speak about before Kerry died and after she died. You might speak about before our business collapsed and after our business collapsed. Because we change so much as a result of the trauma. So as soon as the trauma hits, we actually go into survival mode. In other words, what happens is we're in protection mode. And so our limbic brain takes over and helps us to survive. So what this means is that our unconscious and therefore uncontrolled thinking and feeling is in control over our conscious mind. So put another way, we actually lose the ability to think rationally and logically and clearly because the neocortex is involved and all the chemicals, etc. So I don't want to go into too much detail about the neuroscience of trauma because I would be here all day. But just to know that it is a very normal response, we go into survival mode and that our primitive or limbic brain takes over completely and we lose our ability to reason and to be logical. Okay. The next thing you need to know is that the brain actually can't tell the difference between what is actually happening in reality and what we are imagining happens. And the physiological, mental results will be exactly the same. So when I think of the trauma that has happened to me, my body will react as if it's reliving that trauma again. And so when this happens repeatedly, whether you are just remembering it or not, the impact on our bodies and our minds is very, very strong. And with repeated reliving of the events, it can eventually lead to post-traumatic stress syndrome. But we're going to hope to avoid that from happening. All right, so we experience the trauma, and suddenly we are experiencing this unbelievable, unparalleled pain in our lives. And the natural way to survive is therefore to distance ourselves from that pain. We don't want to feel the pain. It's too much. It's too sore. We feel out of control. So what we're going to try and do is put the pain over there so that we can carry on with our life. Okay? And what that does is it leads to dissociation, or let me say, it leads to alienation of ourselves. We are keeping the pain and everybody else over there, and we are over here. We're very alienated. We withdraw. We're very alone. Okay. The second part of it is that because we don't want to experience that severe pain, we kind of pretend that it hasn't happened. And that can lead to dissociation or a fracturing of you as a person. And in extreme cases, it obviously can lead to quite severe psychological conditions. So we don't want the pain. We're trying to survive. We're trying to protect ourselves, and we're going to withdraw. So other symptoms that one can experience, and they're very individual. So different people experience differing symptoms. And if you've got any symptoms to add to this, or if you have experienced it yourself or with a loved one, yeah, please add the symptoms that you guys experienced, because it'll help us all to realize that we are being normal. Okay, it's not such an abnormal thing. So very often there is a memory loss around the actual incident itself. It's like our brain is protecting ourselves because it's too painful to go there. So we can't really remember clearly what happened in and around the time of the trauma. But also what happens is there's memory loss when we have subsequent bad behavior as a result of the trauma, and we go a little bit off the rails. our brain cannot believe that we've been so awful. So we also block that memory out. So if you are asking questions and your partner doesn't understand or doesn't know or saying, whatever, it's because they don't remember. And it's a protective part of the brain that is allowing us to not remember, so therefore to put the pain aside. Is that making sense? There's also, as we withdraw, we're going to avoid. We avoid people, we avoid situations, particularly situations that remind us of the trauma. We avoid emotions. And that process of avoiding emotions is called numbing. And we can use all sorts of things to help us numb ourselves. We can indulge in alcohol, in food, in drugs, in movies, whatever, as a way of numbing ourselves so that we don't feel emotion. And I have spoken before about when you numb the pain, in other words, the negative emotions, we cannot numb selectively. So we also numb the positive emotions that we might be wanting to feel. Look it up on Google if you need more information about that. So with the alienation and the withdrawing, we lose connection. We can become totally disconnected from our families, from our friends, from our jobs, and we will just be going through life as if we are on automatic. There's no real engagement. There's no real feeling. There's no real connection. We are on autopilot. Okay, so another thing that happens is because this big trauma that's happened to us has left us feeling that we are out of control. We couldn't control what happened. And now our whole life feels strange and new and out of control. So very often a symptom of somebody who's experienced a trauma like that is to try and make up for it and to then micromanage the things they can control. So it's very difficult for the person who is trying to be controlled or is being controlled, because you might have had quite a free, flexible relationship before, and now suddenly your partner is controlling your time, controlling what you're eating, controlling all the activities, and it is an attempt to make them feel that they are in control despite the trauma. Okay, despite the trauma. So you might find that the person who's experienced the trauma suddenly becomes very controlling about the exercise they do, the food they eat, the hours that they sleep and the hours that they're awake. And that is because they're trying to feel that they themselves are in control, because their whole world has become unsafe. And so by controlling, they feel a lot safer. You can often have a feeling of absolute dread in your stomach when you wake up in the morning and you realize it wasn't actually a nightmare or a dream, but it's the reality of it. So physically, there can be the feeling in your stomach. You can actually be physical ill, lots of nausea, bad headaches, body pains, because your body is in shock, as is your mind. There can also be excessive volatility with the person who's experienced a trauma, mainly once again because they are feeling out of control. So there can be lots of anger, there can be lots of fighting, there can be lots of shouting, and even for people who are normally very calm, and both my husband and I are relatively calm people, we had some humdinger of battles because we were out of control. Our emotions were out of control. Our world was out of control. And so volatility is something that we experienced a lot. I mentioned before, there's the inability to reason or think logically. So if you are in an argument with someone who's been through a trauma, often their reasoning is completely illogical. And that's what makes people think that they've lost their mind. But it's just because the logical thinking part of the brain, the neocortex is not able to function properly. We're in survival mode, we are panicking, we're in fight and flight or freeze, and because we are in neurobiologically in that position, we cannot think logically. So for one who hasn't been traumatized, to expect logical reasoning is a bit unfair. We chase everybody away because we cannot connect with them. We haven't got the emotional energy to deal with them. We are unaware of the fact that we may be being quite abrupt. So actually the quality of our life just plummets. The quality of our relationship plummets because we are not able to understand each other. And certainly when Mike and I were in that situation, the challenges we were facing seemed to be completely overwhelming. There was not an understanding of what was happening. We were out of control. The pain, as you can imagine, was indescribable. We're trying to deal with our remaining daughter, Kathleen, trying to pretend that we're normal when none of us felt that we were normal at all. So that feeling of abnormality, disconnection, alienation, that's a very real and normal effect of experiencing a trauma. So what is our role in a relationship then when trauma, particularly the external trauma, comes in? Okay, so I'm not speaking about trauma within a relationship. It's when there's something outside that has come in and affected us. So according to Dr. Megan McElleran, who gives a very interesting TED talk, her solution sounds very simple. And what it is you need to stay connected. You need to stay connected. Even if you stay connected just to one person. So even if you're having a psychological care and counseling, if you are not connected just to one person, that counseling and therapy might not be successful. So for her, the most important thing that will help us to deal with the trauma and move towards healing and then eventually to be thriving again is to have connection. Okay, so our job, whether it be individual or jointly, is we need to remain connected, and we can learn the skills that are needed to remain connected. I did give a talk 2 weeks ago about remaining connected, but all the skills are empathy, it's understanding, they can all be learned. And that might be your challenge to help your loved one in your relationship to come through it. So we're going to try and connect in very simple ways, okay? Because life is very blurry and noisy. So we're going to connect firstly physically, and I'm not going to be speaking about connecting sexually here because that can be a minefield. I'm just talking about physical things, physical comforts, good food, maybe warmth, cuddling with each other, possibly exercising together, so that physically there's a companionship that is very important. So that you're going to try and connect through companionships. The second way is once we physically are feeling connected, then we move on to trying to connect with them as far as their feelings are concerned. Bearing in mind that people can be very numb, and this can take quite a long time before you can connect as far as feelings are concerned. So what we're asking is just to treat them with gentleness and kindness, okay? To just be there, to not overreact when they might be overreacting. If it is your spouse or partner who suffered the trauma, our challenge is to be as consistent as possible, to just remain being the rock in our partner's lives. It sounds relatively easy to do, but it is very difficult because this is a strange person you're dealing with who's not reacting in the normal way. And so even though it sounds difficult, sounds easy, it is really difficult for you to have to learn to do that. If both of you are suffering from the same trauma, like Mark and I, like losing Kerry, then I really would suggest that one gets professional help, because it really is a difficult process to work through. And both of you are suffering, both of you are changed, both of you are working from survival mode, so you fight or flight, you're very volatile. It's very important that you feel totally at ease and confident with your psychologist or therapist. So you might have to try a few before you find the one that really suits you. And it's worth changing if you need to find that one person who's going to really be able to make a change in your life. So I'm going to leave you with the following things. Remembering that trauma is normal. Sorry, the reaction of trauma is very normal. The neurological pathways in our brain are changed, and that affects who we are, how we behave, what we think. Secondly, the most important thing that you need to do in helping a partner who's experienced trauma is to stay connected. Stay connected in whatever way you can find to do. It may well be life-saving. So if you feel that this video has helped you, or if you know somebody that this video might help, I'm going to ask you please to firstly like it, and secondly to share it, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around how we deal with trauma, and it leads to decimation of many relationships. So we're going to try and limit the decimation that happens as a result of people suffering trauma. And I ask you just to be very gentle, extra kind to your spouse, to your partner, if they have suffered a trauma. As always, I thank you for your time and listening to this video. And next month, the month of March, I'm discussing and having interviews with people who are suffering from invisible illnesses. In other words, you can't see that they're sick, and you're expecting them to behave in a normal way, but actually they're very ill. So until then, thank you so much again for listening.